Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being back with me today. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so excited to have Nancy Rynes with me today. Nancy was a former atheist slash agnostic, and then she had one near-death experience. I just learned that she actually has had another one, which she's going to share with us today. So I'm very excited. She's going to share with us her near-death experiences. But before we get into that, I'd like to let you know that her links will all be in my description. She has a website. She has another website for her art because she's also an artist. And she's written a couple of books, Awakenings from the Light, which I have personally read twice. I absolutely love it. I'll probably read it several more times. So I highly recommend that you check those out. So check my description box if you'd like to get in touch with Nancy. Thank you so much for being with us, Nancy. I'm so honored to have you here.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks for reaching out to include me on your show. I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Your story was key for me when I was going through a really rough transition of deconstructing from some pretty strict Christian teachings that I was raised with. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to you. Would you like to start by just sharing your first near-death experience, the situation surrounding that?
Sure. Well, usually always start if people, especially if people don't know me at all. I'll give a brief background of where I was, kind of before I had the NDE, because it's really important, I think, to give a little bit of context. And as Melissa said, I was an atheist, agnostic. I had been raised in a very Christian household, but kind of sort of in my teens, sort of became a scientist. And in my mind, that the sciences were all about, kind of denying faith. Now, that's not really the case, but that's kind of what I took away from it. And so for a lot of different reasons, I really moved away from my faith in my teens, but definitely through my 20s, and kind of maintain that. uh, it was a little bit more than skepticism. A true skeptic is someone who's questioning and open, to explanations. But I was kind of past that. I didn't really believe in anything, and people couldn't really tell me that there was something, and I would not believe them. I really wanted to. There was a part of me that really wanted to believe in something deeper or bigger or more meaningful, but I just never, for myself, I never saw the proof of it. So I kind of I did try to keep an open mind, but really I was very, again, kind of against faith and against, I mean, even really, really deep belief in anything other than physical existence. And kind of the funny thing is that now I believe that physical existence is an illusion. So we can go into that later. But back then I was really into the physical material world, and that was really the only thing that was real. And that really kind of stayed with me until my mid 40s. I was in the sciences. I had started out as an archaeologist and an archaeological artist. Was also a geologist. And it was really that geology that I stuck with for the most part, for the next 20 or so years. I did some stint in healthcare, really, again, from a kind of a technical, kind of scientific side of the house, but still, it was really deeply into the technical and science arenas. And in my mid 40s, at that time I was living in the Boulder, Colorado area, and it's, for those of you who don't know, it's kind of a booming tech area. The whole Denver area is, but certainly Boulder, and that's why I was there. It kind of as part of the science and technical boom, and I was working at a small software company, and I think it was late 2013. And in late 2013, it was, November, December, I was feeling very blah about my life and very I didn't know where to go with my own life. I was feeling somewhat dissatisfied, and I knew I needed a change. And I also felt, and this is weird, I know, coming from someone who at that time really didn't believe in anything. I also felt that a change was coming. And I can't I can't really tell you how I felt that, because I was apparently not a believer in anything, but I felt that there was something, a change coming up. And honestly, I thought it was a job. I thought I was needing a new job. I thought maybe, well, I need to quit my job and find something else that's a little bit more, exciting or challenging for me, or whatever. So I really did think that there was a job change coming. In early January 2014, I had, so just a month or two later, I had taken a week, a little bit more, maybe a little bit more than a week off between Christmas and over New Year's, that, end of 2013, beginning of 2014. And, I was still living in the Boulder area. At that time, the weather was incredible. Boulder in the wintertime can be exceedingly beautiful. It was like 60, 70 degrees during the day, dry, sunny, none of that. If all you are in New England or on the East Coast, you know what winter can be like. Well, Boulder isn't quite that way. They do get snow, but this, break over Christmas was very dry and very warm. And so it was a Friday, January 3rd, I decided to go out for a bike ride just around town. I was going to pick up some library books and, go to the grocery store and grab a couple of items to take home. And I had a really bad feeling about this bike ride. Now, up to that point, an exceedingly avid biker. I mean, I was biking at least 150 miles a week, traveling both to work and also just for recreational riding. So for me to have that feeling was pretty strange. Normally I don't, I just, I ride and I don't feel anything like that. But this morning I felt like I should put my bike back in the garage and go back in the house and just go about my day. But I didn't. There was something kind of, in some respects, I think, pulling me along the path of, getting out on my bike. Maybe it was just bullheadedness or something. I don't know. So I went out on my bike, and about a half a mile or so from my house, I was in a bike lane and entered a roundabout, those traffic circles. And at that time in Colorado, those traffic circles were kind of a new thing. They weren't real prevalent. And so a lot of people didn't know how to use them. And people felt very, I think, unsure, what should I do? Where should I go? So the bizarre thing is, with this traffic circle, the bike lane completely petered out, and then the traffic circle became very narrow. So I had to merge with traffic, which itself wasn't a problem, because the guy behind me saw what was happening and he stayed, quite a ways back. And as I was coming into the circle, though, I noticed that there was, I think, at least two or three cars coming in from a side road, from my right hand side, that they would meet the traffic circle. Now they had I think it was a stop sign right there at that, where they would come into the circle. So they were compelled to stop and wait, until traffic cleared. But as I was coming up to the intersection, at first I thought it was okay. And then at the very last second, I realized that that first car, which was actually a very large SUV, instead of stopping, she kind of accelerated into the traffic circle. My assumption is that she didn't see me, but then she wouldn't have seen the car behind me either, because she would have hit one or the both of us. As it turned out, she hit me broadside, um, as I'm on my bike, and I don't remember exactly how this happened. I mean, that moment where she hit me was very vivid in my mind. I did not lose consciousness through any of this, which in hindsight was a very good thing, because if I had, I probably wouldn't have survived it. So my remaining conscious was really scary, honestly, but also saved my life. So I'm very grateful that I remained conscious. But somehow I ended up, so she hit me, I ended up, so I don't know how this happened. I ended up flipping somehow up onto the hood of her SUV, kind of holding on to where the windshield comes down, to the hood. And I'm looking in the window at her, and she's texting. She's got her phone up on top of the steering wheel, kind of like this, looking at the phone and not where she's going. So that's why she didn't see me, is she was looking at her phone, not at me. And I could see two little kids in the back of the SUV. Kind of, they saw me, but she didn't, and she just kept driving. And I'm, kind of stuck on the hood, looking in at her, and she keeps driving around, and I'm trying to hang on. I can't. I slide down. I'm trying to make a long story short here, but I slid down the front of her SUV, hit the pavement, and that's when kind of all of my bodily damage happened. Um, I broke a ton of bones in that in hitting the pavement. But as I hit the pavement, one really bizarre thing happened right at that point. And I didn't think a lot about it at the time, because I was, concerned about surviving. So I hit the pavement, but then I noticed, huh, I'm observing the accident from outside of the accident, while at the same time, there's a part of me still in my body experiencing the accident from inside of me. So to say that it was bizarre was putting it mildly. Like, no one had ever told me anything about this kind of event before. And I'm kind of freaking out because, number one, I'm, in the middle of this accident, and she's literally rolling over me. Luckily, I was in the middle of her wheelbase, so I wasn't being, run over. But what happened is I had a backpack on, and there was a chest strap here. And I believe that it was the chest strap that got caught somehow on the axle, her front axle. I really don't know how that happened, but she started dragging me from this chest strap. So I was kind of stuck under her vehicle, being dragged along as she's driving. And then I had a reflex to reach up like this and grab the axle, because in that quick moment, I thought, if I let go, because she's in a turn, those back wheels are going to run right over the middle of me. So I grabbed, and I had no idea what I was going to do other than just hang on for dear life. But so I grabbed her axle after I was starting to be dragged. But as this is happening, I have that outside perspective that's so different. And it was the first indication that I had that life wasn't the way that I thought it was. So that part of me that was outside was very calm and peaceful and loving and centered and focused, and just very gracious and loving. I mean, really, that's that peaceful, loving self that we all have at our cores. So that was my, basically my soul had gotten pushed out of my body. But then there was, like, what I call the human level or body consciousness that was still going as well. That was still in my body. And that level of consciousness was so different. It was all about fear and survival. And it was terrified, almost like a wounded animal. That's what that part of me felt like a wounded animal. And those two aspects of my consciousness remained separate until the accident stopped, and then um, the the attendants started working on me, and I'll get to that in a moment. But so it seemed like forever. I don't know how long it was specifically, if it was maybe a minute at most that I was kind of separated and watching events unfold. But what finally stopped this woman from driving is that the guy that was in a vehicle behind her saw what happened, and bless his heart, drove around the traffic circle the wrong way to cut her off and to keep her from going anywhere. So that's actually what stopped her, were, bystanders that physically got in her way to get her to stop. And so she stopped, and I started to kind of wiggle out from underneath the vehicle. And I was still in that kind of there's a lot of different terms for it, but that disparate state where I've had my soul consciousness is outside my body, and then I have got that human consciousness. But that human part of me was still terrified. It was in fight or flight mode, and it wanted to get up and run. And it wanted to get up and run after it attacked the woman who hit me, because I was pissed. And then I wanted to run. So I started to wiggle out from underneath the vehicle, and kind of literally out of the blue, a woman who looked to be in her late 20s. I wasn't really sure, because I was, in a lot of pain and terror, came up and put her hands on my shoulders just like this, and, told me not to move, that her name was Anne, and she was a trauma nurse, and that she was there to help and to stay with me until the paramedics arrived. Now, I don't know where she came from. Just as a side note, nobody could track her down after this. So either she was a master of disappearing as a person, or she wasn't a person. We're not really sure. The district attorney's office of Boulder County literally looked for her for 6 months and couldn't find her. And you'd think a nurse would be kind of easy to find, but anyway, she was unfindable after this accident. So whoever she was, I'm very grateful to her, because her putting her hands on my shoulders and keeping me calm kept me from getting up and running, because that's really what I wanted to do. If she hadn't done that, I know I would have tried to have gotten up. Later, I found out that if I had gotten up, I would have at least been a paraplegic, and very likely a quadriplegic, because my back and neck were broken all up and down. When they finally got me to the hospital, and I think later in the day they finally had an estimate of how many bones were broken. It was crazy. It was like 24 bones that were broken in multiple places, each multiple places. So as far as the number of fractures, it was well over 100 different fractures, probably a lot more than that. And most of them were in my back and my neck. My neck was a mess. One of my vertebrae was kind of about 70% blown apart. There wasn't really much left of it. And that was in my lower back. So if I would have tried to have stood, my back would have just collapsed in on itself. So she saved I can still walk today because of her and because of what she did. So I'm very grateful. But it was as they were starting to work on me that those two parts of my consciousness came back together. And I remember I was in a lot of pain, but I still thought about like what that was. I didn't have a clue what that was. And I thought, wow, that was really weird, but I just don't have the capacity to deal with that right now. So I put it off to the side of my mind, because I knew I needed to really focus in on what had just happened, and kind of coming out of it still in one piece. So I alluded to the numbers. They took me to the ER. I had a lot of broken bones. they decided that I needed surgery on my back to stabilize it, because otherwise I would be flat on my back in a hospital bed for at least 6 months while everything healed up. And I couldn't imagine that. You're talking about somebody who was just biking 125 to 150 miles a week. Laying on my back in a hospital bed was not going to happen. So they scheduled me for surgery for the following Monday. I found out later, much later, that they didn't expect me to survive the weekend. And that's why they scheduled surgery for late in the day on Monday to kind of see if I was going to make it. I had just a lot of traumatic injuries, collapsed lung, fractured sternum, a fractured pelvis. I had bleeding somewhere in my abdomen that they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Luckily, that took care of itself over the next couple of days. The collapsed lung took care of itself over several days. But really, the biggest challenges were my broken bones. So obviously, I survived that first weekend and went into surgery. And it was during surgery where my main NDE happened. Um, when they brought me in, they gave me general anesthetic, and I remember starting to drift off, and the nurses and doctors were talking, and I remember all that. And then I drifted off, but instead of going to that kind of what I call that gray state of nothingness that we experience during general anesthesia, I woke up, not in the OR, but I woke up standing up on a hillside, and I thought, whoa, this is weird. This is really weird. Maybe I'm hallucinating. That was my first thought. Maybe I'm hallucinating. But then I realized, well, wait a minute, I'm under general anesthesia. And I'm thinking all this stuff. So anybody who knows about general anesthesia knows when you get general anesthesia, and they also gave me an amnesia drug so I couldn't remember, your brain isn't functioning this well. And it's intended to shut your brain down, not to heighten its awareness. And so I'm thinking all this stuff like, oh, I wonder if I'm hallucinating, what's going on? And I'm thinking and thinking, and then I'm realizing that, wait a minute, this is different. I'm feeling a lot of peace and love. How can I feel love? I'm feeling love coming through me as if it was like I always liken it to standing in front of a fireplace on a warm or on a cold winter's day. That radiant heat that comes through you from a fire. That's what this love felt like. And I knew it was love because I had never felt this level of love from anyone before. Like, this was big, really, really big, and very welcoming and so peaceful. I just wanted to melt into it. And I felt as if, somebody was just holding me, not literally, but I felt like I was being cradled almost, and welcomed and accepted. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't like any surgery I've been in before, because I've had several. Nothing like this ever happened. I was always just out cold in that gray state and then woke up in the recovery room. Never had anything like this happen. And I'm kind of looking around, and I'm seeing like trees and mist and, mountains in the distance, but still that love is there. And then I started to wonder, I wonder if I died on the operating table. And if I did die, I'm looking around like, why am I here? My parents told me I'd end up in a place a lot warmer than this. And I thought to myself, well, if this is what happens after we die, I'm pretty cool with that. But then I started that feeling of unworthiness crept up, and I didn't feel worthy of this place I was in. Like, I've really messed up in my life. I became an atheist. I don't believe in any of this. Why am I here? And then there was a voice that came. It didn't really come into my ears. It was really a heart voice, more like a feeling and I mean, it was a voice, but not the way that we experience words. And this voice, the meaning of this voice was in answer to that question of why am I here? And it said, you are my child. You're a part of me. You're a part of this. You're a part of me. This is your home. Welcome home. And I'm going to cry again because it's just so, every time I tell some of that story, it's like so powerful. And in an instant, like that, just that instant, my heart melted and I remembered, oh yeah, that earth life, that wasn't really home. This existence, whatever, we'll talk about that, I guess, but whatever this is, this spiritual place, this is home. And I'm a part of all of this. And it was this, it wasn't a crisp memory. Like I didn't all of a sudden remember everything, but I remembered a lot of stuff. And just the sense that, yes, it's like this is where I belong. This is my home. And I didn't want to leave immediately. I didn't want to go back to this life. It's hard to say time, because time doesn't really exist there the same way it does here. But it seemed like it was just a few moments. I had a visitor. There was a female looking figure that came up kind of from my right side. And honestly, it looked like she just kind of materialized out of the mist, like in some, really cool special effects. But she just materialized kind of out of the fog and walked up to me. Now, the other funky thing about her, I could see that she was a little bit taller than my view of my body. I mean, I had a sense of a body, but it wasn't really this, human body here. But I still carried a sense of a humanness with me. And so I saw her as a vaguely human looking spiritual, I could just call her spiritual being. And she looked to be a little bit taller than me, with very long, very dark hair. Her skin was kind of a mix of all of our races. It was just a middle toned, kind of everything mixed together. So that wasn't like she was Caucasian or African or Asian or whatever. It was kind of just, I hate to say the word generic, but basically a mix of everyone. And the funky thing, though, is that and I got the feeling that she wasn't allowing me, but she was not allowing me to see her face, no matter how hard I tried. And boy, I tried. I couldn't see her face. It was always just a little blurry, like I wasn't allowed to see the details, or as if it wasn't really all that important. And I think it was more of the latter, like it wasn't really all that important that I attach a specific look, to her face. It was more important that I just learn. And that's what she told me she was here with me to do, was to teach me what I needed to know in order to come back here to this life and make it the life that I would want to live, and to change it and to be helpful to people, just to improve myself, basically at a second chance, to get my stuff together, to live the life that I wanted to live, and not be kind of off the rails in a life that I didn't want to live. So I was stuck though on the before you go back. I did not want to come back here. And I was very adamant about that through my whole experience. And for me, that whole experience um, felt like it lasted kind of the equivalent of about 2 to 3 months of Earth time. So what I mean by that is, in order for on Earth, for everything to do everything that I did with her would take the equivalent of about 2 to 3 months here. So that's why I call it my semester in heaven, because that's what it felt like. It was about a semester, and it was nothing but teaching, teaching, teaching. And I remember, luckily, I remembered all of it after the surgery, so it wasn't wasted. Um, but she taught me things like, what the nature of divine love, how to be more loving and more present in my life, how to cultivate connections with other people, and not just we're not just talking superficial lessons here. It's really deep stuff that she was talking about. So yes, there are superficial lessons that people can take away from what I learned. But I mean, even I go back through this material and reread it and get new, deeper stuff for myself each time I read it. And then I'm able to kind of strengthen my own spiritual core. But the most important thing that she wanted to teach me was love. And that love, divine love, love for each other, love for our planet, love for ourselves, love for the entire universe. That is, if we don't take away anything else, that is the most important thing that we can work on in this life, is just our expanding our capacity to not only love the divine, to love ourselves, truly deeply love ourselves, because most of us don't. And also to love each other truly deeply in the way that the divine extends that love to us. And that was the most important. She talked about a lot of other things that really meshed with that, like our power of choice, how our words and actions affect other people, how they affect the world around us, whether we believe it or not. Everything we say and do affects someone, um, even if it's just us. So we have to start to learn to focus our thoughts, be cautious of what we say and how we treat other people. All of that is really important. And I spent so long with her there, and I'm just trying to, like, I'm worried that I'm going to forget everything because it's so much. But she said, "Don't worry. You'll absolutely remember all of it. Not to worry." And I thought, well, I don't know how I'm going to remember this, but okay, well, I can only take you for your word, because I don't have a notebook that I can carry with me. It's all, crammed in here and in here. Um, and then after, this 2 or 3 months, she finally turned to me and said, "I need to send you back, because I've got other stuff I need to do. Um, and you need to go back to your life and continue on." And I threw a temper tantrum, to, kind of like a 2-year-old, truly like a 2-year-old, screaming and not wanting to go back. And I was afraid that my body would be paralyzed, that I'd have to deal with, tons of physical impairments and, wow, wow, wow. I was really feeling sorry for myself in that moment. She did what I call a little bit of a spiritual healing. So she kind of laid her hand on my collarbone. I had broken, right out here, this distal end of my left collarbone, and it was really painful. And I had broken my sternum, cracked it up here, up at the top end, and then broke 5 ribs on my left side. And she just did like a laying on of hands almost on those areas, and then sent me back to my body, basically kicking and screaming. Um, but when over the course of the next couple of days, I started to realize, well, wait a minute, those things don't hurt anymore. She had taken away all the pain. She didn't necessarily heal those wounds outright right away, but they certainly didn't hurt anymore. And the cracked ribs did not hurt at all, which kind of freaked out my doctors. It freaked out me because those things really hurt when they're broken. But she took away a lot of that pain, which made healing a lot easier for me. But so when I woke up and came back into my room, I had no idea what had just happened. Like, I was flipping out. No one had ever, I'd never heard about anything like this. I mean, the only story I had were from the Bible, So I'm like, what am I, Lazarus or something? That's the only thing that was popping into my head were these stories from, the Bible. And that's like what I dealt with the rest of that evening. Like, I didn't know what to do with this. What is this thing? So the next morning, which would have been Tuesday morning, one of the hospital chaplains, who happened to be a Lutheran minister, came in, which I always tell everybody that was weird in and of itself, because when I was admitted to the ER, I was adamant that they not send a chaplain in at all, because I was an atheist, didn't want to talk to anybody, don't waste your time on me. That's not going to work. So she walks in. I'm like, oh, thank God you're here. I need to talk about this with someone. But she had come in as kind of a follow-up to what had happened in the OR, to just check on me, because she not only could, she knew what was going on from the chart, but she said, I also felt it when I walked past your door, that you are really needing someone to talk to. So she came in. Lucky for me, it was very unusual that she was, even still today, she was very, very well versed in all of these different types of experiences people can have, when they're seriously injured, when they're nearing death, when they do die for a time, things that happen with family members when a family member dies. So she was well versed in all of these different types of events, and was able to really listen and speak with me about it, and said, well, when I asked her what happened, she said, well, you died. First of all, you almost died during the accident itself, when your consciousness was outside your body. She said that you were on your way to dying at that point. But then, during in the OR, you did die, and your soul left your body and went to what I would, she said, what I would call heaven. You might not call it that, but that's what I do. And she said, what you had is what's commonly termed a near-death experience. And I went, huh, never really heard about that before. Maybe just vaguely, but certainly nothing in detail. It wasn't anything that had ever entered my world. But she talked with me about it for probably about 45 minutes, and helped me realize that I wasn't crazy. That all the things that had happened were real. I mean, I knew they were real. It was absolutely assured that they were real to me. I just assumed everybody else would think I was crazy. And some people, I'm sure, do. That's, their deal, not mine. But part of the thing that I told her were, I was not only given all these things that I needed to learn and do, but there were also some predictions for the future that were given to me, I think, is kind of like a way for me to prove that this was real. And the funky thing is that they did come true, and it came true later, but again, it was just those proofs for myself that I needed to see that, yeah, this was real. And it took me probably a few days to get up the courage to tell my family what had happened. And then it took me about 3 months really to tell my friends. Even though they knew something had happened and I was very different, and I had changed a lot, even in that short amount of time, I still felt very hesitant to tell anyone. Um, Mostly I was just scared, and I didn't know how anyone would react. I did end up losing a few friends, a few kind of work colleagues, but I kind of expected that. This is kind of some very bizarre stuff for a lot of people, and I got that. Um, so I spent like the next, I wrote my book a couple years later, and then I, spent another couple of years during this time I was continuing to really just learn as and kind of put the NDE into practice in my daily life. So I was literally focused on taking all those lessons and like wringing every little bit of information out of it for myself that I could, and incorporating that into my life just because I knew I needed to. I mean, if I'm here, I was given this opportunity, I'm not going to blow it. I wanted to really learn how to live love every day as much as I could. I wanted to learn how to extend love to other people, to myself, all of that. So that's what I worked on for the next, few years, until I'm going to talk a little bit about the second NDE, which I haven't really spoken about too much. It happened in December of 2017. I had taken a early, like right before Christmas, I went on a trip I was living at that time in Seattle, and had taken a trip to Chicago to, that's kind of where I grew up. So I wanted to go back and just revisit, see some friends, see the city. I love the city, and just to reacquaint myself with it. But on the way back, I think I picked up some kind of a virus or something. And about a day later, this was over Christmas, I noticed I was starting to feel kind of congested in my right lung, and feverish, and not feeling good. And by about 4 hours later, I was really not feeling good. I was running like 102, 103 fever, basically out of it, and very, very challenged to breathe. My breathing was very labored and very shallow. I don't know why I didn't go into the ER that evening. I did not. Um, but I went the next morning because I still was having trouble breathing. I was passing out left and right. I mean, I couldn't stand up. So I got into the ER, and my blood pressure was super low. My heart rate was like below 40, which is not good. It was at one point it was down in the 20s, which is also not really good. And unfortunately for me, it was the Tacoma, one of the Tacoma hospitals, very busy ER that morning. They had like several car accidents and some gunshot wounds, and I was not high on the priority list because they had people that were obviously needing help quicker than me. So they put me into it was in an ER room, but they had to go, the doc and the nurse and well, two of the nurses had to go off and attend to a gunshot wound. And so I was left there. I was hooked up to the heart rate monitor, or I should say the pulse ox. It wasn't the heart rate monitor yet. And just kind of laying there waiting for them to come in. And I noticed that I wasn't feeling my feet anymore. And it was as if I was going numb from my extremities in. Like all of a sudden, my hands didn't exist anymore, and my arms didn't exist anymore. And I couldn't feel my upper legs, and then I couldn't feel my torso, and I was barely breathing. And I started to lose my hearing. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear the beep of the machines. And then I went blind. I couldn't see anything out of my eyes. And I'm just laying there like, wonder what's going on. And then all of a sudden, I just very gently floated up out of my body, and I looked down, and there's my body, laying on the table, and I'm floating about halfway up between my body and the ceiling. And I remember thinking, well, I guess this is the way most people die. They don't normally, die in a car accident like me or on the operating table. Most people just kind of like gently float up, and that's pretty cool. And then I started feeling that love again. I felt like I was being cradled again. I'm like, oh, I remember this part. This is pretty cool. So I remember the love. I'm feeling the love, and I'm feeling the peace. And just about as I'm ready to really kind of go up through that tunnel that a lot of people talk about, that voice comes back. Darn that voice. That voice came back that I mentioned in the first one. And this time the voice said, it's your choice to stay or to go. Which will it be? Just very matter of fact, giving me the option to leave and completely die this time, or to stay and be in this life again, to basically have another second chance at life. So I guess that would be my third chance. I don't know how many of these I get, by the way, so I don't know if I'm done or not. And I didn't really even answer with a voice. It was, I had this sense that there were two things coming up if I chose to stay. One of those things would involve family, and that my family would need me, but that it would be okay if I chose to go, like everything would be okay, but here's this thing that you might want to, be there for. And then there was some kind of a very vague notion of a project. I still not exactly sure what it is, even like, a little bit more than 3 years later, but I had a sense that there was a big creative project that I wanted to do before I truly left this life. And as soon as I made that, there was a choice that I made with my heart. It wasn't with my mind. It was with my heart. It was mostly for my family. When I sensed that my family would need me, it was like automatically, well, I'm not going yet. As much as I want to, I'm not going yet. So as soon as I made that choice, I was literally slammed like that back into my body. It was really bizarre, just being like pushed back down in. And I woke up and I was fine. And I'm looking around like, I remember coming in, but I don't really feel bad now. Why am I here? And it was just a few moments later, the doc came in, because they had taken some basic chest x-rays before they had to go off and attend to the gunshot wound. And they came back in, and they're like, well, you're only working on a quarter of one lung here. And we're thinking we're going to have to admit you, because I had pneumonia, like it came on like that. And they said, well, your left lung is completely incapacitated, and you've only got a little bit of your right lung that's functioning well. I'm like, but I feel fine now. And I was insisting that I felt fine. My fever had broken, by the way, in that just short span of time. And they noted that, and I could see the doctor like, what the heck is going on? I go away to attend to a gunshot wound, and somehow that cures you. And so she checked me again, and she must have listened to my lung like a half a dozen times, both lungs. And she's like, I don't hear any issues now. So they sent me back in for another chest x-ray, and everything was cleared.
Wow.
Yeah. Which freaked, kind of like, whoa, well, that's pretty crazy. I've never heard of it healing that quick. And she was like, didn't know what to make of that. And she's like, well, I guess I don't have any reason to keep you here if you don't have a fever, you're breathing fine, your pulse ox is looking better. It wasn't recovered fully yet, but but and my oxygen saturation was getting better. My pulse was back up to kind of normal, and my lungs look good. And she's like, I don't really have any reason to keep you here now, but so I'll send you home. If if you're feeling sick, call us again. Um, so I went home, and within a few hours, I mean, I wasn't even coughing after this, nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay, I know I've got to, whatever I just chose to come back and do, whatever that was, I know that I have a big purpose to come back. So the second one was really all about me really fully embracing and choosing this life. Because the first time I felt like the choice had been taken from me, like I was forced to come back here. The second time, I really embraced being here and doing whatever it is, that I'm supposed to do, even if it's just to love. And that was the gift really of the second one, was having the opportunity to choose to really be here, to deepen my presence, to deepen my own spiritual connection to what I call the divine, a lot of people would call God. Um, to really fully, deeply, more passionately embrace, this spiritual side of me, because it is me. It's a part of all of us too. So the second one is really a gift, in a way that it was a gift of choice for me to really, again, deepen my presence here and to really connect with my life in a way that I hadn't before. Um, so yes, in the last 3 years since then, I've kind of branched out and done some other things, but um, I mean, I've talked now for like, I don't know, 50 minutes. So if you
No.
want to, if you want to ask stuff, please feel free. I don't want to, usurp your own podcast here.
Oh no, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. It's a little bit different every time you tell it, so I was really blessed by that. And also getting to hear your second near-death experience was awesome. Um, just a couple things. First, I wanted to note that during your first near-death experience, when you learned all of these lessons, you put those in your book, Awakenings from the Light, correct? Because
Yeah.
a lot of people will probably be curious about that. And I found that book to be extremely practical and helpful.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, I loved it and I highly recommend it. You can read it and learn all about what Nancy was taught in her time in heaven. The other thing that I want to mention before we go here, the quote that I heard you say so many years ago when I first found your story, that was just mind blowing to me, because I was raised from a very strict Christian background where we were taught God is this being outside of you and heaven is a place that you go when you die. But you said in your experience, you saw that love was the structure. I think you said the structure that made up heaven, but it's also the structure that makes up everything here on earth too. And you said it's here, it's not somewhere else, it's right here, and we can learn to tap into that. So
Yeah.
that thing that those of us raised in religion are taught to spend our whole lives chasing, it's right here, it's all around us. And then I also heard you speaking in an interview that you had come up with some better words to describe it, and you used the words crystalline lattice structure. Would you like to talk about that for just a few minutes?
Sure. Yeah, that was an interesting thing. So that the whole love teaching that I was given was really beautiful, and I did put a lot of it in my book, Awakenings from the Light. Um, the, the crystalline structure really started when, my teacher was trying to teach me about what divine love was and how big it was. And so she showed me kind of like in this sort of in the sky, sort of a projection on the sky of, that divine love being a giant diamond or a giant crystal. And that's this huge, like, universe of divine love is like a giant crystal. And each one of, when we love someone here, or when we have love for, our pets or family members, or even the divine God, that's like one facet on this entire, universal kind of crystal. But I was also shown kind of a representation of what that divine love looked like in that structure. So she said, like you just described, the structure of heaven is built on love, but also the structure of this earthly realm is also built on love. The physical
Mhm.
is built on that divine love. And she showed me this kind of a vision of what that looked like, kind of down at, I think, like the nano level, like the really tiny, minuscule level. And it really looked like um, almost like a crystal. So if you were to take, I don't have any crystals here with me. I'm a geologist, by the way, so I've got rocks all around me. But um, if you look at like a quartz crystal or something, and you were to zoom in on it and zoom in on it and zoom in on it with like an electron microscope, you'd see each crystal has a very regular pattern of what we call a crystalline lattice structure. And it's what it is are energy bonds of all the different little atoms and molecules within that crystal. So like if there's two, atoms here, they bond themselves together via electromagnetic force. But what she showed me was that electromagnetic force that it forms the lattice work of crystals here, you can think of that as the lattice work of the entire universe, not just this physical universe that we perceive of as physical, not just that spiritual part of the universe, but all of it. And it looks everyone is connected to everyone else in this lattice structure via these, that divine love energy. It's that energy of divine love that binds us all together, and it forms um, like this regular. To me, it looked a little bit cubic, but it was actually not three-dimensional. It was multi-dimensional, and and I knew it was more than three dimensions because it wasn't looking exactly 3D to me. And I've done a lot of geology work and I've done a lot of crystallography, and I could tell that what I was seeing wasn't three dimensions. I found out later from one of my readers, because I had described this lattice structure and all of those energy bonds that go back and forth, um, not just amongst all of us, but just in general that make up this universe around us. Um, and it turns out what I was seeing was either 8 or 9 dimensional. It wasn't 3D. It was a I was experiencing it as a 3D person, as three dimensions, but it was actually 8 or 9 dimensional. And to me, they both look very similar. So I can't distinguish them from, this physical body. But it was definitely an 8 or 9D geometry that I was seeing kind of projected into a three-dimensional now, awareness.
Mhm.
And I knew that all it was like a multi-dimensional spider web, but the spider's webs were of energy, and it was that energy of love that connected us all together, but not just as people. It was also the rocks, the trees, the animals, the planets, the stars, everything, not just humans. And that was like a big revelation for me. Like, whoa, wait a minute, we're connected to all of it. And not just, people on this planet necessarily. Now, I don't know about if there's any beings out there in the universe, but the implication is that it doesn't matter where that other being is. We're all somewhat connected in some way. So that's kind of a long-winded explanation of it, but it's all just that pervasive energy field. I consider it now like an energy field of what I call divine love. Some people call it like a divine consciousness, and that could be another term for it, or the divine matrix. But there are several different terms that all describe that same interconnected, universal, loving energy that connects us all together.
Wow, that's so fascinating. That may be the most interesting thing I've ever learned in an interview. And you also, I heard you say that that when we're loving to each other and to the world, that we strengthen that structure or that field.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have the ability to interact with that on a daily basis, even if there's no one around you. Like here right now, I'm living by myself. And so when I wake up in the morning, it doesn't matter that there's no one else here. I can still interact with that field of love just by starting off my day, and with loving intentions, with prayers, with, reading spiritual texts or spiritual, books or something like that. So I set myself up for success at the beginning of every day and just try to strengthen that field of love around me from the get-go, from the time I get up in the morning. And if you have people or pets around you, starting off the day by being loving to them is also a good way to strengthen that field around you.